time on the west side of Atlanta. We have 54,000 square feet, the largest center in America, dedicated to entrepreneurs of color, entrepreneurs, innovators, dream creators, creating a place and space of belonging. I have a firm belief that the only difference between Bankhead and Buckhead is access, opportunity, and exposure. And I literally want to live at 504 Fair Street at the nexus of access, opportunity, and exposure with the H.J. Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
Fantastic. Nathaniel, sorry.
No, it's fine. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Smith, and I serve as the founder and chief equity officer of the Partnership of Southern Equity. We are a nonprofit organization that works to advance what we call a new Southern agenda for equity and shared prosperity in the American South. Atlanta has a great history, a civic history of the private sector partnering with organizations that are working to level economic opportunities in communities. We've had great leaders that have done that. Partnership for Southern Equity continues to advance that agenda through what we call Just Opportunity, which is an economic inclusion agenda where we work with the private sector and other key interests to encourage more inclusive growth and shared prosperity by making an economy that works for everyone.
Fantastic. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I was an entrepreneur in Chattanooga, about 2 hours away from here depending on traffic. And there was a partner at a big VC firm in Silicon Valley, who I shan't name, but he asked a question. He says, how many of you are VCs? And people kind of did like this, because Chattanooga's not that big of a city. They said, well, how many will invest in startups? And a lot of people raise their hands. He says, how does it feel to lose 98% of the time? And you hear crickets. He said, well, that's what actually happens. I've only won 3 times. Now, you know these names, eBay, Google, Facebook, but I lost a lot of money. Are you prepared to do that? And I wasn't focused on the loss, I was focused on the 98% failure rate. I'm like, what in the world? What market allows that? What industry allows that? So I went through my head. Football, nobody completes 2% of the passes and stays in the NFL. Baseball, no one gets a hit once every 100 times. And see, there's no industry that allows that, meaning it's not natural. Meaning that market is far too shallow. So when you look at a place like Atlanta that has incredible wealth and incredible poverty, Nathaniel, what does your organization do to close that gap?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think there's a huge disconnect in terms of prosperity in this city and the region and what is actually happening on the ground. One of the fundamental questions that I always ask in conversations like this is, can a city truly be smart if it's not just? How can we work to ensure that we're leveraging the talent that we have in communities that have been left behind, understanding that cities like Atlanta can't import all of the talent that we need. We have to work on cultivating the talent in communities that have been left behind. So for us, through the Just Opportunity Circle, we have close to 50 organizations that are involved in the economic inclusion space that are working to advance new policies, new indicators, and new relationships that will hopefully realize economic opportunity for vulnerable communities. We also have a coalition of private sector employers called the Just Business Roundtable, where some of our larger employers in the city have decided to work together to begin the process of advancing an economic inclusion agenda with us.
Fantastic. So you're working on the coalition side and the policy environment. And policy is important because policy can create or destroy markets. Now, Jay, you're actually training people. You're creating a place in the innovation ecosystem for people to go. Tell us more about the legacy of Mr. Russell, number one, because people may not know who he is or who he was, and about what specific programs you're all looking to build.
Certainly. It's personal for me too. I was a 14-year-old kid. I'm born and raised in Atlanta, grew up in South DeKalb County. I used to steal my mother's car at 14. And I used to drive around Southwest Atlanta because I did not believe that black people could live in houses that looked like that. I learned about a guy named H.J. Russell, who literally built the community that he lived in because at the time, black folks weren't allowed to live north of a certain point in Atlanta. To give you some context, guys, if you do business in Atlanta, especially if you're African American, say thank you to a guy like H.J. Russell. This is the guy that underwrote the Civil Rights Movement. This is the guy that had a pool inside his house in the 40s where a young Martin King, before he was even Dr. Martin Luther King, used to go there and be mentored. This is the guy that integrated our Chamber of Commerce. His fingerprints are on half of the skyline in our city. Literally is part of the fabric of what made Atlanta great, but that's part of what makes me so passionate about doing this work. When I talk about race, guys, I don't talk about it from an emotional space. I look at it like an economist. And in Atlanta, as we talked about all this extreme wealth, here are the numbers that also crush me and why I do this work. Although Atlanta to the world is seen as the Black Mecca, if you peel back a layer, 71% of African Americans in the city are liquid asset poor. If they had a $2,000 emergency, could not satisfy with their own resources. 37% of us have a net worth of zero. And if Atlanta leads the country in income inequality and economic immobility, then if we're 54% of the population, the real story, guys, in the city of Atlanta with its borders, there are no poor white neighborhoods. There are no failing Latino schools and no Asian ghettos. 100% of that demographic driving those deplorable statistics are African Americans. And if you create a strategy to move our economy without specifically focusing on African Americans, you're being intellectually disingenuous in your approach. So I take those statistics and look at how do you create a space that is deliberate and intentional to try to raise the economic capacity of an entire people. And part of my job is, yes, to create programs and platforms that give access to companies to grow and scale. The other part of my job is to literally give a community license to see value in their own reflection again. To create a place and space that is so amazing that they say, you know what, we deserve to have this in our community. Undergirding belief, undergirding self-esteem, undergirding self-worth, and that whole feeling that I believe it, I can do it. Mr. Russell, think about this, coming out of a Jim Crow South, stood about 5'10" with a severe speech impediment, built a building that was a full city block wide. He built that building to run his company, yes, but he also built it to be a symbol to the community of what was possible. So for what we're doing at the Russell Center, it's nothing new. Mr. Russell was doing this 50 years ago. Just call this Russell 2.0, and we want to do the very same thing.
So Mr. Russell predates Maynard Jackson.
That's another part of the story. Maynard Jackson's first financial chair, the guy that gave him the baton to say, yes, go run, was a man by the name of Herman Russell.
My goodness. Now, Nathaniel, are you all looking to, replicate what Maynard Jackson tried to do on a broader scale? Or are you fundamentally changing the strategy for equity?
Well, I think you can't, from my perspective, you can't move forward in the future if you don't honor and understand the past. Maynard Jackson is an icon in Atlanta, and through his commitment to leveraging public dollars, facilitated the wealth of many African Americans in this city. It was through his courage. Remember the connection between civic engagement and economic justice. He was able to create this opportunity for many. So for us, we understand that you can pour money into a community all day long, but if you're pouring water in the bucket with a hole in it, you're not creating the type of substantive change that we need in community. And so Maynard, as our first African American mayor, understood that. So it is about working with the private sector, working with corporations like Siemens and Cox and MailChimp and others who understand the economic mobility challenges that we face in the city, but also we understand the role of government and procurement policies and public finance and finding ways to leverage dollars as Maynard did to ensure that communities of color, in particular Black communities in Atlanta, have a chance to fully benefit from the economic opportunities that public dollars create. And unfortunately in this city and unfortunately in other places around the country, we're seeing a trend where public dollars are being used for private gain, right? And so those dollars are not necessarily used in a way to create new economies that are working for everyone. So for us, it's about learning from the past, but also elevating, as Jay said, the imperative that we have a shared destiny. Our economy, the businesses, the people that are doing well, have a shared destiny with the people that aren't doing so well. And if we don't create an economy where those people are looked at as an asset and not a liability, then we won't be able to compete in this global economy. And so, again, this question, can a city truly be smart if it's not just? I would submit to you that it can't be competitive if it's not just. And we have to find a way to find an intersection between economic prosperity and also economic inclusion.
You hit what we used to call in Virginia, I'm from Virginia originally, Sweetwater. You talked about the link to wealth creation, competitiveness. And so, are you hearing from some of the companies on your, is it the
Just Business Roundtable.
Just Business Roundtable, this idea that, forget all of the historical issues with respect to folks of different ethnicities. There's human capital that's not being leveraged that I need for my shareholders to build value. Are you hearing that at all?
Well, and Jay knows this, I have a propensity towards pushing people to think of things that they may not necessarily be comfortable talking about. When we talk about equity, one of the greatest differences between equity and equality is history. And so we can't move forward without understanding the role that structural injustices played in creating wealth in our communities. One of the great pieces that have come out recently is the New York Times 1619 Project, which talks a great deal about how our national economy was not built in the industrial age, it was built through cotton, right? And in the antebellum South. So many of the businesses that we're working with have opened themselves to understanding how our economy has been built and are really trying to figure out a way to heal the systems that have perpetuated those injustices, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because if you have a city where the majority of your workers aren't prepared for the businesses that you're trying to invite in to become a part of your local economy, then how can you be competitive, right? How can you be competitive when you have a transportation system that does not get capable workers to the jobs that need to be filled? So there's an aspect of it that I think our private sector understands. Atlanta has a history of having a private sector that understands the big picture. I think that for organizations like the Partnership for Southern Equity, sometimes we have to leverage an amount of tough love, I guess you could say, in getting them to the table to understand that their destiny as a competitive business, our destiny as a smart city, is connected to our ability to bring everyone into our local economy.
So we've kind of described the water. I want to talk about solutions, but before we get there, some of your early successes that make you smile. I'm interested in what inspires people from their current work. So just riff off the top of your head, what comes to mind?
Early successes. With the center in life. With the center or in life?
You the boss.
Ha, my man. I'll tell you.
Somewhat on topic.
Somewhat on topic. I think that I'm good friends with David Lightman and David Cummings. They're the two founders of the Atlanta Tech Village in Buckhead.
Yes.
Premier Center, worldwide acclaim. I had them come down to my construction site and mentor me about what was possible. They're like, Jay, we were in the same position. We had a building that wasn't finished, but we wanted to get started. It took us about 6 months to get to our first 47 adopters, folks that wanted to be in here, although we hadn't created the whole puzzle. And it's going to take you that long. Be patient, 6 months, probably get to your first 50 or so, and you can build from there. Cordell, in 6 days, we got 397 applications for black businesses that wanted to be in our space. We sold out of every office space that we had completed within 2 hours. When you start talking about the power of belonging, place, and space, even an optimistic guy like myself didn't realize how compelling it was to literally have a safe space where entrepreneurs could fail and fly. Because in other spaces for entrepreneurs of color, I gotta be twice as perfect. I can't appear to not know something. I can't appear to look ignorant or have anything. I have to be perfect in every regard, and we know that if you're feeling that you have to give this perception of perfection, you can't grow and you can't learn. So we opened this space, although we weren't even done. We're seeing 600 to 700 people every week come through our doors, and we're still a live construction site. So,
Can we celebrate that for a second, please? That's fantastic. It's fantastic.
And it's one of those things that makes me smile, because literally when people ask how things are going, in my mind we're still at zero. But for where we're trying to go, guys, and I'll end with this, that yes, we have the 54,000 square feet that becomes this large epicenter. But through Mr. Russell's vision, we also own the 42 acres that surround our building. It's the largest assemblage of property owned by a single entity in any Tier 1 urban core. Owned by black people, controlled by black people, planned by black people. And literally when you start talking about what can come from that, I see it as the same way as Silicon Valley was born out of Stanford. We have the opportunity to do that because right across the street we have Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse School of Medicine, ITC, Morris Brown. To our east, we've got Castleberry Hill, one of the largest concentrations of black-owned businesses in the country. There is something really, really powerful that is about to happen on the west side, and I'm just blessed to be a part of it in the city.
That is fantastic. Okay, and Nathaniel, you are governor, and this is my scenario. You're governor, and your job, you've asked your staff to create policy that is going to create a space for people to have more opportunity to spread the wealth here in Georgia, Atlanta specifically. What are the core tenets of these proposals that you would suggest to your staff to create?
So the first thing that I would do in terms of economic development is we know that economic opportunity development follows good infrastructure. So the first thing that I would do is initiate a fix it first strategy, because many of the communities that are suffering the most have the worst infrastructure. So how can we find a way to invest an amount of money to build up the infrastructure in communities that have been disinvested? That's the first thing. Second of all, I would make sure that there is a balance between private gain and public investment. I mean, one of the big challenges that we're having in the city right now is that we're building big stadiums, we're building large infrastructure projects, we're providing dollars for housing, and the public is not necessarily benefiting from it the same way that private investors are. So I would work to make sure that for every dollar that goes into a private investment, that there has to be some level of community benefit associated with it, not just in terms of the kind of peripheral benefit, but a local hiring policy or a training policy, or for workforce development, or working with public schools to ensure that kids who graduate have a chance to compete for those opportunities. That's the second thing. And the third thing is that as we begin to emerge and move towards a clean energy economy, how can we work to ensure that the people who are burdened the most by high energy bills actually have a chance to participate in the clean energy economy? As we continue to expand our solar, as we continue to expand clean energy policies, that provides an opportunity for us to move away from the extractive economy that we're in today towards a more regenerative economy. And I think that as we transition to a clean energy economy, we have an opportunity to do that.
Are there any policy leaders that you really admire doing fantastic work right now that kind of follow those tenets, or any of those tenets, I say?
So one of the things that I would definitely like to lift up is our current mayor. She has, when you ask Jay about accomplishments, one of my accomplishments would say that this conference is using the word equity. I think, when we started as an organization, we didn't have many opportunities to have this conversation. And one of the things that the mayor has done is actually created a One Atlanta office, an office of equity. And they have really tried to really move the equity conversation forward. So creating the conditions for that, I think is what I've been really excited by through the mayor's work. But I'm also really, and I have to say this, excited about certain private sector leaders in our city. In particular, one company in particular, MailChimp, who has really understood the urgency of the inequities that we face in this city, and they're trying to do all they can to stand shoulder to shoulder with the partnership with Southern Equity in advancing this work forward. We have to have an all-in approach to minimizing the levels of inequity that we have. The business sector can't stand on the sidelines if they want to continue to be competitive and prosperous. And I think Atlanta is the perfect microcosm of what we need in terms of a larger agenda. But just because necessarily we may not have clear policy leaders the way that I would like to see, because that's the clear answer to your question, I think that doesn't mean that we can't make them, that we can't create them. We have several leadership development programs that we have, because we understand that we have to grow the leaders that we need today. And I think all of us have a role in doing that.
Well, I mean, you point out Mayor Lance Bottoms. I think she's fantastic. I want to be the first to nominate her to be the next president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, because I think she's fantastic, and this office of equity is very, very rare among cities of this size. We have about 3 minutes left, and I do want to provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions. But Jake, you said just one floor is done in this building, correct? Tell us about the plan for the rest of the building.
That'll take another 10 minutes.
Take one.
Literally beacon on the hill. In the same way that Mr. Russell created this space to be a symbol of hope, literally I want to be the embodiment in a physical space of hope for what a community can be.
Fantastic. Questions? We have time for 2 questions. You'll have to yell it and I have to repeat it because you won't be mic'd. No questions?
All righty.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, Atlanta is a city of 27 Fortune 100 companies, 16 of which are Fortune 500 companies. You have 14,000 technology companies here in Atlanta. There's a lot already here. But these 2 gentlemen to my right and my left represent the really best of Atlanta. Please join me in congratulating these 2 great men doing amazing work and the impact they're going to have.